Steve Zonardo here with Real Estate on Record. We're with Mike Gaddy, and we're going to talk all things Airbnb today. I did a short video in the past just regarding some of the changes that are going forward. Mike, are you seeing anything on Airbnbs?
Well, we're just even talking to a few clients. We were talking about numbers for the Airbnbs, and it sounds like from what we've been talking about in your video that you posted last week, they're cutting down in different cities. I guess, is it more in the States or is it both?
It's actually worldwide.
Worldwide?
I just focus on the States because that's going to be our hub, right?
Okay, yeah. So I guess like major cities are kind of cutting back on who's allowing and what the rules are, I guess, more and more, right? So now it's affecting buyers, from what I've seen, that are going to buy properties on Airbnb numbers, and then they can't afford to like rent it out on a long-term rental or even a seasonal rental, depending where you are, Florida, Texas, wherever it is, to get your returns, right? So that's kind of what I've seen in the last little while.
Yeah, I was never a big fan of them, and I'll be the first to admit I missed the boat because people made a ton of cash off it, no doubt, and God bless. But you got to look at the long term on that too. And again, when I was selling properties to clients that were Airbnbs, I'm like, just make sure the numbers work. You got to make sure that you can, if Airbnb for some reason disappears and you can't do a short term rent or the neighborhood changes, make sure you can long term rent it. And it's like you said, people were buying these properties based on Airbnb numbers, which didn't matter what you paid for the property, you were profitable.
It was going to work any day of the week, no matter what.
1,000%. And I was always dumbfounded with hotels, like the hotel chains, like the Marriotts, the Hiltons, like how they allowed that to penetrate their system. Because think about it, if I'm a hotel chain and I have millions beyond millions invested in cities with these infrastructure, building, employees, there's a lot at risk, and then you have 10,000 units pop up available around you, and that takes away from your rentability in their market. So I'm surprised they didn't lobby faster to kind of end it. And I read an article, it was published in Business Insider on December 29th, that they're starting to crack down. They're going to change all regulations. I'll go into some of them. Like one of them was really interesting because the states, they don't fool around, specifically in some of these states that we're working in now. Like they're pretty hard up, and when they say no, it's no. They're not going to get it done.
Another thing is too with the Airbnb, I think the timing now, right? Like during the pandemic, everyone they didn't want to see people. They wanted their own space.
Yes.
They didn't want to be in a hotel. People didn't want to be in condos, right? With the elevator and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, for sure. I was one of them.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And I think now with the timing where everything's kind of more open, like it's not as much of an issue now. So
isn't it nice to go down and get a cocktail at the bar?
Yeah, that's kind of it. In that sense, it's nice where. Like I have 3 kids, I don't want to have to cook every night.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, okay, we can go to the lobby, or I can order food to my room.
How about clean?
Yeah, cleanliness.
Every other day, at least your room's turned over and everything's clean. You probably have access to a pool, which I'm sure Airbnbs have them too. Oh, naturally, a lot of them do.
Of course. Yeah. So I think going back to like timeline, I think now that I guess for the most part the pandemic's somewhat behind us, but I think. I was talking to Stefano prior to us coming on, and I think it's location too for me. Like I think if I was at like a cottage style thing somewhere close to the water, I think I would want maybe that cottage
for sure.
feel
That
Airbnb.
makes sense.
But like if I'm in a big city, I'm looking at location and convenience of having all the amenities at my fingertips.
Well, let me chime in on something. Actually, I want to challenge Steve on something.
Oh my goodness!
You said that you were wondering why the hotel chains didn't lobby against it sooner.
Yes.
But this also applies to Uber. Because why didn't all the taxi unions lobby against Uber? You know why? Because they're both brand new concepts that the laws weren't in place for them. Mm-hmm. So it was really even hard to lobby against Airbnbs because it's someone's property that they're renting out on a short-term basis. So what would the Hilton have to say about that anyways?
You answered your own question.
No, I didn't.
So what do you mean? Because it was a short...
Yeah, because you're wondering why they didn't lobby against it sooner, but they had no grounds to. There was nothing in place.
But no corporation has any grounds on anything. But if they're losing money, they're going to build something.
But Airbnb's been around for how long?
Not long. How long?
More than 5 years.
That's long for a corporation?
For a chain of
The Hil-
hotels
the
to
Hi-
stop this
The
from
Hilton's
happening.
been around since like the 50s, right?
So why wouldn't they jump on it right away?
Yeah, I guess in the beginning they never thought it was a threat, right? And then ultimately, but remember, corporations, they move slowly. And then it's like fiscal years, the bottom line, the bottom line. And if you're always at the top as an elite bubble, you're not really seeing anything, right? So if they would have paid more attention to this, yeah,
So you think it takes too long to get up the ladder?
for sure, 100%. Nobody wants to stand out and say, hey, this is a threat. Like everyone wants to get paid. If it's a privately owned company, they would have been on it a lot faster. Because even the Hilton, obviously Conrad Hilton owned the Hilton Group. If you ever read his story, he's an amazing guy, very entrepreneurial, very real estate based. If he was around, they would have slaughtered that real quick. It wouldn't even have had a chance.
You sure?
1,000%. Conrad Hilton was a beast.
So where do you guys see
They're-
the
these are
future
all-
of Airbnb now?
Listen, Airbnb will always have a place, but not like what it did. Number one, if you look at the people that host Airbnbs, they're so unaffordable these days. You're telling me I'm going to spend like some of these things $10,000 a week? Like they're unaffordable. Like honestly,
$6,000 to $10,000 a week.
it depends. Like a cottage in Muskoka, what is that going for? $10K a week? It's got to be something crazy.
There's up to 10K. Yeah,
Yeah.
you could, like I would say it's minimum like 5-6K a week.
And some like just on Simcoe, not even like a great lake or whatever. There were $7,000-8,000 that we were looking as a family.
Yeah.
So before you used to split that. You said, okay, fine, we go down with 2 or 3 families, we split that expense. But some of these don't host that many people anymore, or they shrank them down. It's come unaffordable.
But before Airbnb, you couldn't even rent a cottage.
Yeah, you did. You rented them more. So before Airbnb, like the internet, let's say, you still did it. Like you went to Wasaga, you had websites.
Yeah,
there was always something.
So what
There was,
happens
like,
to
the
those
local-
sites now?
They're still there.
Yeah,
They're just not as big.
So Airbnb is the
mainstream
the
anymore.
popular.
Yeah,
thing,
mainstream.
right?
I think, to be honest, I think the pandemic helped like magnify
Oh,
the
for sure.
success of Airbnb, right? Like,
Oh, you don't think it actually hurt Airbnb? Because no
No.
one wanted to go here.
what do you mean?
No one wanted to go to Airbnbs, man. They got slaughtered. Think about it.
During the pandemic?
No,
Sure.
they
No.
thrive.
We were
I-
just talking about germaphobes, right?
Yeah.
Now, how do you know if the Airbnbs are properly cleaned?
You're entering one door.
Yeah.
You're the only people in that premises. You have no cleaning lady in there. You'd rather clean yourself and you'd rather cook yourself. You're in your bubble.
Did the pandemic, did the government,
Talking from a germaphobe.
did the
from
government,
experience?
did they stop the Airbnbs though because of the pandemic? Did they
No.
forbid it like some of the businesses that couldn't be open?
No.
No.
And I think that's what the hotel at that time, like think of it, Airbnbs were taking off through the pandemic, right? And at that time, hotels like were kind of like getting nailed, right? So there's only so much I think leverage that the corps, like the whole big hotels, had to fight against Airbnb at that time.
Yeah.
Now I think it's kind of shifting where, okay, now people are coming back. Traveling, business, even just business. How much money do hotels make from business travel, right? How much business travel got cut in the last 2-3
Oh,
years?
for sure.
Right?
Okay, so then if you have a client like myself and I come to you, Steve, or you, Mike, and I say, all right, guys, I want to invest in a property, but I solely want to do it Airbnb, what would your recommendation be?
I mentioned earlier in this video. I said if you want to do it, that's fine, but just don't think that it's going to be long term. You're going to put everything, give it to them up front, and then make sure that what you purchase at the numbers make sense. Because if you're based on $20,000-$30,000 a month in rent, and because it's Airbnb, saturation of whatever income. And if you got to go long term after, and that's like a $5,000 a month property, and you based, the purchase price off this substantial $20,000-$30,000 per month, you're going to get screwed. You'll lose that property. You'll lose it because you'll overpay for the property, and then at one time the city will pull the short-term rent. Listen, buddy, if you live in a neighborhood like we do in New Kleinburg, people Airbnb houses there. There was a shooting. Someone got murdered. They had 20, and we know the agent, and I know the location. They Airbnb'd the property. It's not even like a McMansion. It was a 4,000 square foot house. He went in there. They rented to whatever it was, like these. I guess people related to gangs and stuff like that, and they got murdered in that house. So you spend in that area went up to $2-3 million per property. So your neighbor's Airbnb, and there's a murder next door, and you're paying your taxes, and this guy has this big property. I would fight against that day and night. I wouldn't let that rest. I swear to God. Because you got family now, you got kids next door. So now, why would you want to have all? So this is just an extreme example of why short-term rentals are going to fail, because it's the citizens that are going to take it back. It's happening now in Marco Island in Florida. Sarasota. Like I have like an article here. Like I'll kind of go through it. There's 24 states right now that they're putting heavy restrictions, and we're not talking like some run of the mill area. We're talking like I'll rhyme through all the areas here. So just for example, Atlanta, Georgia, what they're doing now. There's 7,100 listings. Okay, so Airbnb listings in Atlanta, Georgia. Okay, so let's see here. It says, however, according to analysis of city permitted data by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, roughly 10% of the city's 7,100 listings applied for permits 2 months after the application process opened. Less than 3% received permits. 3% of 7,100 people. What does that person do? What does that person do that bought whatever they bought based on Airbnb numbers? That's new inventory that I'm going to buy at a very cheap value.
But doesn't this mean that the buyer of that property is ignorant and didn't realize
1,000%. Like
that's not a good area for Airbnb?
Bitcoin, FTX, NFTs. How many? They say that the mother of stupidity is always pregnant. Does that make sense? And that's an actually Italian proverb. So the mother of stupidity is always pregnant. There's always someone else in line to do it. I'm not saying like Airbnb it's a good business. People made a lot of money through it, but don't think it's going to be long term. You got to be aware that it can end. You're building hotels next to family residence. It's not going to happen unless they allot an area that's specifically done for short term rentals. It's different, but you can't just be popping into areas, right?
It might not go away. Like I don't think it's gonna go
No,
away. 100%,
no. But it's a
more,
start.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like it's gonna kind of like simmer down to like pre-pandemic kind of where.
For the Airbnb layout.
Yeah, I think so.
It'll
Do you
come
think
down.
there's going to be any successors coming from it? Anyone that's going to find some other loophole around it and maybe do it?
If the city sets the regulations for short-term rentals, for example, now obviously we're in Florida and we're learning a lot about this HOAs and stuff like that, how they control things.
What's HOAs?
So homeowners association. So what they do is there's basically restrictions on that whole area. So as soon as you cross those gates into that gated community, you have restrictions. So it's almost like now cities are going to have that restriction. So like for example, I'll give you two extremes or two different versions of what we invested in Florida now in West Florida, Southwest Florida. So we have one area in North Fort Myers. It's a nice little detached property, and that used to be. So for short-term rentals, it was only 4 leases per year. So you can rent it out 4 times per year, minimum 30-day stints. Okay. So you didn't disturb your neighbor. At least 30 days, someone would have to live there. And usually if someone's there for 30 days, they're not going to cause too much trouble. You know what I mean? So now that area opened up to 12 months, 12 leases per year. So I can lease
huge.
it, 12 times at 30-day stints. So it's not like before I was like we had to break it up into quarters, have to lease it out for 3 months, 3 months, 3 months, 3 months. Now I can do it on a monthly basis, which is that.
Nice.
Then we get into Verdana, like where we're building our family home now. That's only 3 leases per year. That's at finish, and the minimum is 30 days. And then some other areas are like less than 60 days. You can't do 90. You know what I mean? 6 months. So there's restrictions. So if you kind of look at that, once the governing board puts restrictions on how many times you can lease a property per year, or the time period, because now they're starting to do like 30-day pluses. You can't do minimum of 30 days. And then a lot of these, if you look at these 24 cities now, they're not doing it. Also, some of the restrictions in some of these states is that you have to actually live in the house. So you have to be a permanent resident in this property. You can like skip off for like 2 months or whatever, and then you can short-term rental that. But you have to physically live in that house. Like you have to have like your ketchup and mustard in the fridge at all times there. You know what I'm saying? To kind of stem it down.
I guess I agree and disagree. I think if it's your property, you should be able to. I mean, I guess they should put some regulation to it, but it's tough, man.
It shouldn't be, because there should be areas allocated for that. Like if I spend money in a neighborhood, why do you come in here and you don't live here and you're going to disrupt my family?
That's the biggest problem I have with Airbnb. It's you've spent $1 million on your home, and now all of a sudden neighbor.
That's the whole problem.
Yeah, okay.
So you live in your area. You have your kids, you play in the yard, you got a dog, you spend all this money, your property tax are going up this year, is another segment we're going to talk about. And it's like, and now your neighbor, that doesn't even live here. If you live in Brampton, he lives in Toronto, and he's like, screw it, this is good investments, I can flip properties here. And then your neighbor now, there's a new person there every weekend partying,
Yes,
smoking
exactly.
weed on the deck like a big
Exactly.
ganja, and your kids are like kicking a ball and they're like cross-eyed because they're stolen from the neighbor. What are you gonna do?
Exactly.
Are you not gonna fight against that as a
And then another thing is too, like think of this we have the housing issues. We don't have enough housing, right?
yes?
So now these are taking like long-term rentals
sense.
away from the market, driving up prices for our long-term rentals, right? Which we already have the infrastructure for hotels. So why don't we keep hotels and long-term rentals,
That's a
with
great point.
500,000 immigrants coming.
It's a great point for
Right.
sure. Now those can be used for families rather.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my thing. And then again, these are great businesses. People made a fortune, and God bless them. They made a fortune off these things. It was such a great business to make money.
Yeah.
Just I hope they've they looked at both segments of that, like make sure that their rent's going to cover. Thanks for watching, guys. Please like, share, and subscribe. We're going to be on all podcast main platforms. You'll see below here. You'll see all the different platforms, and we'll get you on the next episode.